Sarvebhyo Namaha. Good evening. A very warm welcome to all of you to this online lecture series organized by the Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara. And this series of talks intends to introduce Kannada writers and their work to non Kannada audiences. And I extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Ajakkala Girish Bhatt, the president of Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara, the registrar, the members of the executive committee, and to all our listeners who have logged in from various parts of the world. We have had illuminating and absorbing sessions on various Kannada writers thus far, and many of our listeners have had very positive things to say about this series of talks. And Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara feels encouraged to host more such talks in the time to come. Today is the concluding session of this series of talks, and we have Sri H.A. Vasuki with us to talk to us about Shatavadhani, Dr. R. Ganesh. Dr. R. Ganesh, like all of us are aware, is one of India's most reputed scholars and poets. In the context of today's talk, what is perhaps important to us is that he is a polyglot. One can even say a hyper polyglot who is familiar with almost 17 languages. So, this has enabled him to access various tongues, not just his native tongue, that is his mother tongue, Kannada, and Telugu, which is his second most favorite language, if I may say so, and also various other Indian languages, various other foreign languages, etc. So, in this series of talks, which intends to introduce Kannada writers, what happens is Dr. Ganesh has used all these languages, used his knowledge, used his familiarity of all these languages to bring together the content which is unique to all these Indian languages. So, a Telugu speaking person, a Bengali speaking person, a Hindi speaking person, or a person who is familiar with the classical literature embedded in Sanskrit, Prakrit, Pali, say, he or she can access all those profound content in the works of Dr. Ganesh. So, he happens to write primarily in Kannada, but that has not been a barrier to him to give a free reign of expression to the profound content that is enshrined in all these languages. And one more thing that is of importance to us is the fact that he is also a polymath, not just a polyglot, but also a polymath. So he brings together a wide array of subjects in his expositions, in almost all his writings. So he might be writing about science and technology, or he might be discussing a profound or a nuanced aspect of philosophy or literature. So all this comes together as a single whole in Dr. Ganesh's work, and that is what makes his body of work so much interesting and absorbing to us. So to talk to us about Dr. Ganesh's work, we have Sri H.A. Vasuki with us. He has been a close friend and associate of Dr. Ganesh from many years. Sri Vasuki is an electronic engineer by training. He has a master's degree in electronics design from the Indian Institute of Science in Bengaluru. And from the past 16 years, he has been working as a VLSI design engineer. And he has an active and absorbing interest in classical literature, particularly Sanskrit and Kannada. Vasuki is also an Ashtavadhani, which makes him further capable and further competent to talk about Shatavadhani Dr. R. Ganesh. He has a serious and abiding interest in history of India and the evolution of Hindu rights in post 1947 India. So it is a privilege for us to host Sri H.A. Vasuki to talk about Shatavadhani Dr. R. Ganesh. Welcome.
Thanks to Shashikiran for that rather generous introduction. First of all, I want to thank Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati for such a wonderful idea of introducing Kannada literature to a non-Kannadiga audience, and this series has run for a long time now, and it's been run very well. So my heartfelt gratitude and thanks go to Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara the President, Dr. Ajakala Girish Bhatt, all the staff and people who make this possible. So when the introduction that Shashi Kiran gave to Dr. Ganesh, despite being brief, was so comprehensive that it has actually taken away a few of the key points I was about to mention anyway. But it is good that any introduction itself is comprehensive in its own brief way. So, without much ado, I would like to proceed to introducing Dr. R. Ganesh. Um, it is um, it is a challenge to talk about Dr. Ganesh because this is a personality which defies any limits. So when you define or describe somebody in some way, you're ascribing limits to the personality, but this is a personality which defies limits. So whatever I do here today is going to be incomplete. Whatever I mention, I will definitely end up leaving out something. So the idea is to stimulate enough interest in our among our listeners today to make them go and investigate by themselves the body of work that Dr. Ganesh has built up over the years. So, to make the talk a little interactive and maybe a little more, and maybe to bring a little bit more of a connect, I'm relying on a slide deck. So, let's get started. So, Shatavadani Dr. R. Ganesh, the title, as the title itself carries it, is an Avadhani par excellence. And he single-handedly revived the art in Kannada and he's taken it to hitherto unseen heights. Attending Dr. Ganesh's Avadhana is an experience in itself, is an education in itself, it's an enlightenment in itself. For the variety of topics that get discussed, for the variety of knowledge streams that get touched upon in those avadhanams. So, even if he had done nothing else and had been only an avadhani that he already is, he would make it to the line of legends of not just Kannada but Indian literature. But apart from that, he's also a very accomplished poet. So, although Avadhanam, being an Avadhani, implies that Dr. R. Ganesh is a poet, he is a poet not just to perform an Avadhana, but he is a compulsive poet. He writes poetry when he has time. That is his first love. And so he's a poet. Avadhani is another dimension of poetry. But first and foremost, he's a poet. He's also a research scholar with a very high quality of logic and analytical abilities. He is also an orator of the very first order. So at this point, I just want to pause and emphasize on this. It's very difficult to be a first-rate poet or a first-rate research scholar or a first-rate orator. Now, to be all three and to make it all look effortless is astonishing. And that is what Dr. Ganesh is. His broad area of interest is Indology and classical Indian arts. By that, what I mean is it's an umbrella classification which includes history, classical literature, music, dance, sculpture, painting, dharmashastras, Vedas, and lots more. As far as languages are concerned, Dr. R. Ganesh is proficient in Kannada, Sanskrit, Telugu, Tamil, Prakrit, Pali, Gujarati, and a few more Indian languages. Of course, English is something which all of us know, and Dr. Ganesh is no exception. He also has a working knowledge of foreign languages like Greek, Latin, and Italian, and he's read Homer and Dante in their originals. His medium of expression for his writings as well as lectures is largely Kannada, and that is why he becomes relevant to this series of lectures. Although his topics are not strictly limited limited by language or region. His medium of expression is Kannada, largely Kannada. More than 80% of all his output is in Kannada. And so he becomes one of the most qualified personalities to appear on this series. Um, he has numerous works published in English and Sanskrit also, but his natural and preferred medium of expression is the Kannada language. Moving forward, if I have to come up with a set of defining traits of Dr. R. Ganesh, like I said, he's a first rate poet with a deep connect not only to tradition but also to modernity. So it's not as if he is inclined to create verses only on classical or traditional topics. He is open to experiment in all kinds of things. For example, one of his earliest published work on poetry was a Khanda Kavya in Kannada called Dhumadhuta, which was basically an imitation of Kalidasa's Meghaduta, but here the topic was it was about a politician who has lost his position, and he has returned to his native village, and he's trying to send a message to the high command about what he wants, what he doesn't want, and all that stuff. So taking Meghaduta, adapting it to a very mundane and I dare say spicy topic like a politician's manolahari or train of thoughts does not come easy to many poets. So Ganesh has this ability to seamlessly intertwine tradition and modernity, and he also has the ability to tailor the language to suit either type. Next is his bewildering scholarship defined by amazing breadth without sacrificing depth across a gamut of subjects related to Indian culture. Now, here's the key thing. He has amazing breadth, but that does not come at the cost of depth. He has amazing breadth without sacrificing depth. So, which is extraordinary, and I can't emphasize this enough. And a talk like this will never do justice to illustrate this point. His is an original mind formed by independent study. He did not learn although he is a specialist in, let's say, 10 subjects, he hasn't really studied any of those 10 in any university. He's basically a self-taught man. He's done it the hard way. He's learned things, he's unlearned things, he's read a lot of things which probably due to lack of advice he didn't have to read, but he's learned those lessons, and he's basically evolved into a very formidable and independent minded scholar because he's done it alone, and he's done it with very little guidance, which I dare say in many cases leads to a shrinking of your horizons. So as it turned out, the independent study gave him the opportunity to form an original mind, and he's been able to apply it to synthesize facts and concepts across subjects to provide special insights even into very well researched topics. Whether it is Alankara Shastra, Chandas Shastra, these are all subjects which are being researched in our country for at least 1500 years. And Ganesh, in his lifetime, has given valuable insights into these topics as well. And that probably is an indication of how original his thought process is, and how adventurous he is in a way to approach and present his point of view. Now, how is this relevant to the people, to a non-Kannadiga audience? Dr. Ganesh and his works are relevant to anyone interested in pure poetry, creative writing, and analysis of creative works. There is no barrier of language here. Anyone interested in pure poetry, creative writing, or analysis of creative works would have something to take away from Dr. Ganesh's works. Similarly, anyone seeking an authentic, unapologetic, and insightful perspective about timeless aspects of Indian culture will definitely find everything relevant here. The key thing here is timeless aspects. So, Dr. Ganesh has this ability to get to the philosophy of things in a very surprising way. He gets to the heart of things, and he's able to articulate it to anyone with little or not background on the topic. This is a very special ability, and it comes across both in his lectures as well as writings. So, in short, like Shashi Kiran said in the introduction, Dr. Ganesh is a polymath and polyglot of the highest order. And I do not use this phrase lightly here. We live in an era where words like great and genius and phenomenon are just thrown around on a day to day basis without so much as caring about what they actually mean. But here I'm choosing my phrases very clearly and very and in a measured way. I want to emphasize that Dr. Ganesh is a polymath and polyglot of the highest order, and he is advancing the frontiers of Indic knowledge and culture by writing in the Kannada language. And we Kannadigas are actually lucky to have ready access to his body of works, and so that what would take probably years and decades of study are presented to us in the form of a few books. So this really is the relevance to anyone who wants to know. This really is to address those people, the non-Kannadiga audience, who would like to know how Dr. Ganesh can be relevant to them, how Dr. Ganesh's writings in the Kannada language can be relevant to them. Just for the sake of completion of this talk, I just want to briefly go through the early life of Dr. R. Ganesh. He was born to Sri Shankar Narayan Iyer and Srimati Almelamma in a middle class family on the 4th of December 1962. As we speak, Dr. Ganesh is in his 60th year. His childhood was spent largely in Kolar and Bangalore. He went on to get a mechanical engineering degree from UVCE Bangalore. He also did a post-graduation in material sciences and metallurgy from the Indian Institute of Science. He got a D.Litt for his Kannada thesis, Kannadadalli Avadhana Kale, from the Hampi Kannada University. And if I'm not wrong, that was the first D.Litt thesis awarded by the university. He taught mechanical engineering at RVCE and MS Ramaiah engineering institutions for a while, and then moved on to serve in the area of culture and the arts. He served at Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan as well as the IGNCA. As far as his influences are concerned, as admitted by Dr. Ganesh in many of his interviews, he was deeply influenced by the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Bhagavata as a child, and his curiosity, his tastes were molded by the material published by magazines like Chandamama, Amar Chitrakatha, and similar books. He was also deeply influenced by the Telugu cinema of the Puranic genre. So, all the mythological Telugu films of the 50s, 60s, they formed a very strong impression on his mind as far as his tastes of music and literature were concerned. Further, he was deeply influenced by the thinking and writings of Dr. D.V. Gundappa over a variety of topics, whether it is about literature or about life, and Dr. K. Krishnamurti for his views on aesthetics and Alankar Shastra. Early in his career as an Avadhani, he was mentored by the late Sri Lanka Krishnamurti. So these are some of the people who influenced his career and had a contribution to make to the personality that Dr. Ganesh is today. Now we can go straight away to the body of work that Dr. Ganesh has produced over the years. Like we saw earlier, or like we discussed earlier, Dr. Ganesh is a multi-dimensional personality. He has the dimensions of a performing artist, a research scholar, a creative writer, and also a master orator. So, for the purposes of this talk, I'm basically trying to explore those dimensions separately. So we can start with his body of work as a performing artist. Dr. Ganesh has performed over 1,200 avadhanas in a career spanning 40 plus years. If I'm not wrong, his career as an avadhani started in 1981. And till date, he has performed over 1,200 avadhanas, and more than 75% of those avadhanas have been in Kannada. Like I mentioned earlier, he has single-handedly created a renaissance in the field of avadhana in Karnataka. His poetry, as composed in two of his Shatavadanas, have been published as two booklets, Shatavadhana Srividye and Shatavadhana Sharade. The quality, the spontaneity, and the scope of Dr. Ganesh's verses, even in a medium like Avadhana, is breathtaking. And one has to witness his Avadhanas to understand the understand the majestic spectacle that it is. Further, has also been instrumental in creating new art forms, and the next few points illustrate that. So, Dr. Ganesh created this new experiment called Kavya, Chitra, Geeta, Nritya, where on the same stage, for a given topic, the poetry, painting, musical, and dance perspectives are spontaneously performed. So the way it goes is a topic is given, and the Dr. Ganesh himself, who handles the Kavya genre, will address the topic in his medium of poetry. The artist, the painter, in most cases it's Dr. B.K.S. Verma. In all cases it's Dr. B.K.S. Verma so far. He will create a picture to suit the theme, and the musician would have his own challenge, which is related to the mood of the topic. So the musician, in all cases, it's so far been Dr. Nagavali Nagaraj. She will spontaneously address the musical challenge, and then a dancer or a danseuse would enact the theme in the medium of dance. So on a single stage, a single topic is interpreted in 4 different classical media. So this is a very popular show, and it has had 100 plus performances since its inception. The Kavya Chitra Jugalbandi, wherein Dr. Ganesh and Dr. B.K.S. Verma entertain the audience with poetry and painting, has had more than 1,000 shows over the last few decades. He's also conceptualized and enabled 1,000 plus shows of Ekavakti Yakshagana. As most of you would know, Yakshagana is an art form native to Karnataka, and specifically to coastal Karnataka, and it has been identified to have an unbroken continuity to the traditions of Natya Shastra. So Dr. Ganesh improvised on the existing framework to create an Ekavakti Yakshagana, wherein single nata, a single artist will perform the roles of as many characters as are needed in a particular ballet. So the scripts, the music, the whole thing was conceptualized and created by Dr. Ganesh, and this has been a very successful thing. It was very capably demonstrated for over 1,000 performances by Sri Mantap Prabhakar Upadhyaya, and it was very well received by the public. So it was not just that he is Dr. Ganesh has performed as an Avadhani himself, but he's put in his put in his thinking and enabled newer art forms. It's very difficult to create newer variants in classical art forms which have been long established. So these experiments helped bring the talents of Dr. BKS Verma. I mean, Dr. BKS Verma's talent did not need Dr. Ganesh to shine on a public stage, but hitherto he had not done painting as a performing art. So thanks to these experiments, Dr. BKS Verma established painting as a performing art also. The same can be said about the other artists mentioned here, whether it's Dr. Nagavali Nagaraj or Sri Sridhar, Sri Mantap Prabhakar Upadhyaya, or Srimati Nirupama and Rajendra. They came up, they took the challenge and performed extempore for a variety of topics. So the takeaway from this should be that Dr. Ganesh not only enriched the Kannada art scene with his own art form, but he also enabled newer art forms in established traditions of Karnataka. Next, we can look at his body of work as a research scholar. Like we've seen already, he is inarguably the greatest living practitioner of Avadhana and the most comprehensive authority on it. His delete thesis, Kannadadalli Avadhana Kale, is probably the last word on the topic. To address an English audience, he recently wrote and published the work, The Art and Science of Avadhana in Sanskrit, which is accessible to everyone, available online. He is also an undisputed authority on Indian aesthetics, prosody, and classical dance. He's written books to cover all these areas. Alankar Shastra, which was published by Bharati Vidya Bhavan. Bharati Lochana, which is basically a very condensed wisdom from the two immortal commentaries of Abhinava Gupta, which is Abhinava Bharati and the Lochana. They are commentaries for the Nati Shastra and Dhvanyaloka. So Bharati Lochana brings the distilled summary of those two commentaries, which actually are not very friendly to read if someone wants to do it on their own. So Dr. Ganesh has done a great service for people interested to get the distilled wisdom out of Abhinava Bharati as well as Lochana. His upcoming work, Chando Viveka, has advanced the discourse on Chandas from where the great Sediyapu Krishna Bhatta had left it, and he's taken it to the very next level and beyond. Prekshaniyam is his collected articles on dance, which can be accessed by an English audience as it is published in English. Apart from this, the Kannada literary scene has been embellished by Dr. Ganesh through a variety of columns which he wrote for newspapers and magazines, and they've appeared over the years as books and compilations. This is a small list of those works: Abhiruchi, Hokkolabaliya Sambandha, Hasubisu, Kala Kautuka, and so on. In these, Dr. Ganesh has covered everything from, to use a cliche, marble to metaphysics. If you want to know the evolution of Antyakshari, or Pratimala as it was called, you can find it in one of these books. If you want to understand, If you want to understand Swabhavokti, if you want to understand about flowers, and a whole column on flowers that are prevalent in Karnataka, you can find it here. If you want to see how how Pampa Bharata compares to the Telugu Bharatas, you can find it here. If you want to know how, if you want to know what were the philosophical grounding of Dr. D.V. Gundappa, it is there here. If you want to know the aesthetic approach of the poets of Sanskrit, it is there here. If you want to know what Swabhavokti is, then a masterly article is there in one of these books, Hadanu Havanu. Hadanu Havanu. That great Dr. K. Krishnamurti apparently had read that article and remarked that the article alone deserves a doctorate. So this is the reason I mentioned that is to just bring home the quality and depth of the writings of Dr. Ganesh, which have been which are present in these few works here. The takeaway is he's touched, he's explored, he's gone to the corners. One of the articles here is about parrots. One of the another article here is about the ragas of music. So the canvas is so huge that it is impossible to fathom unless you read some of these and realize that it is for real. So, and these are very original thoughts, and very original thoughts embellished with facts, logic, and experience. So these body of work, these few compilations alone are good enough to establish Dr. Ganesh's scholarship and his variety. So it was so difficult for me to classify it. So most of these books you cannot classify it as belonging to one particular genre because the sweep is so big. The topics addressed there are so diverse and so distilled that it's hard to typecast it into one form or another. And that is why these compilations, are like mini encyclopedias in their own right. Further, there are a few special works of Dr. Ganesh, whether it is Bharatiya Kshatra Parampara is a book which details the martial traditions of India right from the Vedic times. It starts with the etymology of the word Kshatra, then proceeds to cover the entire time span from the Vedic age to the present day, and discusses the various the great personalities, the great martial traditions of the country. Shaddarshana Sangraha is a very handy compendium of the schools of philosophy of the Indian subcontinent. Arsha Kavyagala Nudibedagu is an extraordinary work which brings home the poetic beauty of Ramayana and Mahabharata. Ramayana and Mahabharata are so vast that a lot of people don't really go to the originals and basically go with the translation or a condensed summary or basically just the story part of it. But there is so much more detail in those works, and that has been compiled into a beautiful book by Dr. Ganesh as Arsha Kavyagala Nudibedagu. Kavitegondu Kate is a compilation of some very well-known verse in the Sanskrit language, which have very entertaining anecdotes. This has also been translated to English. Samskaragalu, Paramartha Matu Prastutanvaya is a very small booklet. And that booklet was written for a very informal occasion. It's an encyclopedic work on the different samskaras or rituals that a human being undergoes in his lifetime, all the way from Garbhadana to Antyeshti. Dhumaduta, like I mentioned before, is somewhat of a parodic take based on the Meghaduta. Not exactly a parodic take, but it's modeled on the Meghaduta. But the subject is a present day thing dealing with a politician, dealing with a politician who's been brought down from his seat of power and he's returned to his hometown and trying to reconnect to the high command through layers of smoke. Um, Samanya Dharma is a very small booklet which brings home the distilled wisdom of the Dharma Shastras. So the concept of Samanya Dharma, which are like universal values, it's a very small booklet, but that's the last word on the universal values that are espoused by the Dharma Shastras. Uh, so, as you can already see, this is a very diverse and bewildering range of creative writing. What I've forgotten to add here in this list is the most recent of his works, a novel in Kannada called Mannina Kanasu. I think it's going to be formally released in the coming week. So that is a very, very aesthetic synthesis of two great plays of Samskrita, Mrchakatikam and Swapnavasavattam. And Dr. Ganesh um, has melded those two plays so seamlessly and on such a large canvas that the whole cultural milieu of the of about 2600 years ago comes alive in a novel of about 600 pages. And it is his first novel, and astonishingly, um, it looks so complete in all respects that I strongly recommend anyone who knows Kannada to just pick it up and read. It is educating, it is entertaining, educative, and enlightening at all at the same time. Going forward, Dr. Ganesh has also written enlightening biographies of people he's been touched by and he's learned from. Sarvatantra Sutantra on the great Dr. S.K. Ramchandra Rao, Vibhuti Purusha Vidyaranya on Acharya Vidyaranya, the founder and the guiding force behind the great Vijayanagara Empire, Brahmapuriya Bhikshuka on the legendary Dr. G.V. Gundappa, Ardra Jyoti on Dr. M. Hiriyadna, probably the greatest uh, teacher and writer of philosophy of the last 150 years. Vani Vahana on the great grammarian Vidwan N. Ranganath Sharma. Um, these are not just biographies from a factual sense, but these are biographies which bring alive the personalities, their works, the estimation of where they stand in the long lineage of their different areas of study. So even the biographies that Dr. Ganesh have penned are illuminating in their own way. Finally, his body of work as an orator. This is the most astonishing part. He has recorded at least 10,000 plus hours of high quality content on practically everything that is there in the Kannada and Sanskrit languages. Every classic worth its name in Kannada and Sanskrit has been touched by Dr. Ganesh's oratory, and I dare say has been sublimated. Whether it is Kalidasa or Kuvempu, whether it is the Vedas or Dr. L.S.L. Bhairappa's novels, whether it is Gita, whether it is the Bhagavad Gita or Mankutimana Kagga, every classic has had the fortune of being commentated upon by Dr. Ganesh. If someone just listens to these 10,000 hours plus hours of Kannada recordings, he will become a scholar, or he will definitely going to be on his way to become a scholar. If not for anything else, if someone learns Kannada just to listen to Dr. Ganesh's lectures, I would consider the effort worth it. And these lectures these lectures are not just about the content, it's about insights, estimating a given work against its tradition, evaluating a work against the tradition, and saying what is good, what is not good, and doing all this in an objective, unbiased way. So, if someone simply wants to understand the classics of Kannada and Samskrita, these lectures are the place to go. And for the second time in this talk, I would say the Kannadiga audience are lucky that these lectures are in Kannada. These lectures also have very interesting topics, which cannot really be read and spoken upon. For example, there is one uh, lecture series which Dr. Ganesh gave called Anandamaya Jeevanakke Bharatiya Maulyagalu, Indian Values for a Blissful Life. The topic is so the topic is so abstract that it is difficult for anyone to even figure out where to start on it. But once someone listens to that lecture, you will know that there's not just a scholar at work here, there is a creative mind which knows how to stitch the facts and concepts into an organic whole. And that is where Dr. Ganesh's value comes in. It's not just study, it's not just articulation, it's not just um, uh, it's not just study and articulation, it is the ability to synthesize study with creativity and the intellect to make bold deductions on the strong grounding. So that is where Dr. Ganesh stands really tall and really special. And I, at this point of time, think he's peerless at this. I don't think that anyone in any Indian language has spoken on such diverse topics in such a high quality manner. So this is very unique to the Kannada language. And like I said before, the Kannadigas are lucky to have access to this. All those lectures are on the way, are on YouTube already, and some are coming. Some are coming, I guess, on the way. The Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs have been uploading all those lectures. Um, so, in summary, Dr. Ganesh is a living, walking university. And I do not tell this out of, uh, I do not, I do not use this phrase lightly. I do understand what a university means. And when I say Dr. Ganesh is a living, walking university, I mean to say he does research, he teaches people, and he has created a tradition. So universities create a tradition. He has already recreated the tradition of Avadhana. He's recreated the tradition of classical poetry in Kannada, and the a few years ago he created a small group called Padyapana. There is also a website where uh, he guided people to learn classical poetry, writing in Kannada and writing in classical meters. He's done plenty of he does plenty of study circles for interested uh, audience, and variety of works are discussed in intimate detail. And of course, his body of work, published and unpublished, the lectures. And so, all of this put together, his body of work and the way he goes about freely sharing knowledge, I cannot compare him to anything other than a university. He's also an interactive time machine which can bring alive a Kalidasa or a Kuvempu at will. So he's at home with either Kalidasa or Kuvempu, and it's it's difficult to comprehend what it takes to have this felicity. The only way probably to understand it, or to at least begin understanding, is to approach Dr. Ganesh's works and lectures and then take it from there. So, like I've said earlier in the lecture, his works and lectures by themselves are reason enough for anyone to learn the Kannada language. And any translations of any of his works would be the next best thing. So, hopefully, this small introduction uh, would make a few of you at least to investigate into the body of works of Dr. Ganesh, and hopefully you can derive as much joy from there as I have. In that case, I would consider this small effort of mine to be favorably rewarded. Once again, I want to thank Kuempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara, Dr. Ajakala Girish Bhatt, and all the members for providing me this opportunity to give this brief introduction about Dr. Ganesh. Like I said, it's incomplete in many respects, but I hope it has evoked enough interest for the interested few to pursue it by themselves. With that, I would like to conclude my talk. Thank you to everyone, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Vasuki. Some of the people in the academic circles may be surprised after hearing about the achievements of Dr. Shatabdani Ganesh, or the contribution he has given to Kannada literature and Kannada culture and Kannada language. Because sadly, the universities and many other academic establishments have not utilized this scholarship to the extent they should have utilized it. This is my humble opinion. Many academicians in Kannada think that Dr. Ganesh writes and talks about Puranas or Halaganada and such other things. But such people will be surprised to know that he has written scholarly articles on modern Kannada cinemas, film songs, and such other things. He has also studied modern Kannada literature, of course, which are worth studying and worth reading. As you all know, the volumes of collected works of many writers usually invariably include the speeches, prefaces, and even blurbs. Dr. Ganesh rarely permits his speeches to be printed, though they are very beautifully organized, logically developed, and without any repetitions. If you collect his speeches on various topics ranging from Indian and Western, ancient and modern literature to culture, history, and nationalism, uh, which are available on YouTube, they will run into thousands of pages because you get literally hundreds of hours of his talks on YouTube. Sri Valmiki mentioned Vasuki, I'm sorry, Vasuki mentioned how Dr. Ganesh mentored and mentors future poets, avadhanis, and young writers. I should say one thing about the study groups where Dr. Ganesh guides the young scholars. How many of the scholars or writers of today do this sort of service to the language and culture, that too without any monetary or material benefit? In fact, uh, Dr. Ganesh's humility is such that he learns from these study circles and study groups. Therefore, as he is rightly called Vidwal Lokada Vismaya, a wonder in the world of scholars, he is a scholar, poet, and a critic of highest order. I thank Sri Vasuki for introducing a few aspects of uh, Shatabdani Ganesh, though it is really impossible to do justice in such a short span of time. Uh, Dear viewers, as we know, we have had about 22 talks in this series of English lectures on various Kannada writers, various Kannada major writers. All these talks will be available on the Facebook page of Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara. They will also be available in on the YouTube channel of the Pradhikara. And anybody who wants to know about these writers can search and get these videos. And during these past 22 days, we have had good feedback about the series. As you know, today is age of webinars. You get hundreds of links on your WhatsApp. In such a situation, also we could have substantial number of viewers on our Facebook and YouTube channels watching the program live. Anyway, they will be watched in the days to come, and more people, especially the non-Kannadikas, will be benefited from these lectures. And I think the series is a success. Therefore, I must thank not only Sri Vasuki, but all as this is the last day, I also take this opportunity to thank all those earlier 21 speakers, all those who have made this possible, and many even from outside the Pradhikara. That means some of the members have helped us to introduce the resource persons. Some others, uh, some other well-wishers of Pradhikara like Sri Shashi Kiran have come forward and volunteered to do the work of introducing the resource persons or introducing the major writers. So I also thank all such friends. I also thank all the viewers, especially the members of the Pradhikara who have been helping us in uh, coming up with new initiatives and innovative programs. I thank the Minister of Pradhikara, Shri Ishwar Meddi, and the Department of Kannada and Culture, Government of Karnataka, and officials in the department and staff in the department for encouraging the Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara in all its deeds. Once again, I thank you all, especially I also must thank those Kannada writers who have given us such such novels, such poetry, such stories. Of course, who have made Kannada proud. Once again, I thank you all, and uh, with these words, today we close this series, and we will come up with such other series on Kannada writers in future. And I think we'll come up with such other series in a very near future, and we are planning that. And I expect all your support in future also. Thank you, one and all.